Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Long Walk Talks. My name is David Hensley. I'm the owner and creative director of Long Walk Productions, and today I am joined by my two co-hosts, Stan Wilson-Lee.
Yo.
Chris Barnes.
I really hope you put royalty-free spooky music in the front.
That's the plan.
Awesome.
And today we have a guest host for the first time in a while, it seems like. He's a brilliant director of photography and a longtime collaborator with Long Walk Productions. Everybody welcome Chris Neville.
Hey, guys.
Here on out, I'm just going to refer to you by your last names if I can remember to do so, since we have two Chris's in our sad little studio today. And for this episode, we are going to be taking a break from our Roaring Twenties theme to discuss one of my favorite films during my favorite time of year, Halloween. It's John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness.
With your favorite people, right?
Absolutely. I thought that was implied. The original idea for this was we were going to discuss Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, which consists of The Thing, Prince of Darkness, and In the Mouth of Madness. But I feel like trying to coordinate that and make a discussion out of all three films might have been a little difficult. So instead, we're just going to focus on the middle installment, 1987's Prince of Darkness. And like we've done with the other themed movie episodes, we're going to break it down into a couple of topics of discussion. Now, before we get started, I have seen this movie probably 4 or 5 times. Chris, I know you said you've seen it twice. And both of those were with me, weren't they?
Yes, as recently as yesterday, actually.
Now, Neville and Stan, you both just watched this for the first time recently, right?
I thought I had seen it before, but I obviously hadn't. It was a great surprise, and it was the first time.
Very nice. And Neville, you watched it last night?
Yeah, I got to watch it last night.
Excellent. Well, to start off our discussion, I want to talk about the evolution of John Carpenter as a storyteller, going from relatively straightforward, simple films to the insanity that is things like The Thing and Prince of Darkness. I have never, full disclosure, never actually seen Carpenter's Assault on Precinct 13. Have you guys?
I have, yes.
Okay. So it's basically just a bunch of criminals trying to break into a police precinct. Is that correct?
Yes.
There's something in like evidence that they want, isn't there?
Yeah. But it's more of a tribute to the Zombies of Romero, because the criminals trying to break in or the gang trying to break in is modeled after the Night of the Living Dead.
Interesting.
Zombies.
Well, to go from a relatively straightforward film like that to Halloween, which is essentially before the sequels piled on insanity to it, just a crazy guy murdering babysitters on Halloween night. It wasn't until much later we got the whole, demonic cult, Jamie's his sister thing. Laurie is his sister thing. Relatively simple and straightforward films to there is an anti-God, and there is Satan as a form of green goo and religious horror and the end of the world. I want to talk about the leaps and bounds he took as a storyteller and hear your thoughts on.
You're going to be weirded out by mine because
I usually am,
but
No.
If you guys just watched it last night, yesterday, you guys had to have heard, it's a science fiction because they talk about
No kidding.
that it's the entity is extraterrestrial.
well, Jesus is extraterrestrial.
Jesus is extraterrestrial, and
Yeah.
And that's
no,
something
that-
we're going to unpack next.
but the idea that the religious aspect was created because this person came down as the savior of.
It came from outer space,
It came from outer space, and as a savior of humankind on Earth, and then was extrapolated into a god figure, and religions grew up around it and stuff like that. Specifically, Christianity and the idea of we're going to hold this thing, this
This
entity,
alien, yeah,
in this crypt for as long as it takes, and then it turns out to be millions of years old, according to the carbon dating. That chick in the glasses, but
not the other chick in the glasses, Susan.
Who?
Radiologist glasses. Yeah.
Yeah, the radiologist glasses girl came up with the idea.
Well, I don't even
did the carbon dating on the.
Was it her that did it? Because I thought it was somebody else. And we just watched this yesterday, but I didn't think Susan actually got to do anything before she got possessed.
Remember, she brings the thing up to Victor Wong's character.
Okay.
And
I believe you mean Professor Birack.
Professor Barack.
Birack, excuse me.
And I'm wondering if
they only it's like he's only credited as that in the movie.
I know, Birack. That's what I wanted to keep calling was Birack.
Professor Bike Rack.
Bike Rack.
Bikes are triggering.
And she brought out, it's like, this is so weird. It only opens from the inside with some kind of locking mechanism. And I did the carbon dating, and it's like millions of years old. And the dudes were like, what?
Yeah, and if it sounds like I should remember all these things because we just watched it yesterday, there are a lot of characters in this movie,
and they just come and go. Yeah,
with a lot of things to do. Neville, what were your thoughts on? Because I know you've watched a lot of Carpenter films. What are your thoughts on his progression?
I've always found his stories. They weren't overly complex. They weren't trying to make. To dig into other social issues and work with things. They're more entertaining. They're more ideas that just go straight forward. Not that they're simplistic, but ultimately he's a filmmaker who wants to make something you're going to enjoy watching and have some fun watching. And I think this still holds true. I think it's easy to look too far into what something might mean to almost make things up of. He's given some ideas, kind of some parallels, but that's as far as he went, just to tell a story. He wasn't trying to convince you of anything else or dig anything deeper.
I think you're 100% right. I think the core of what Carpenter does is he's telling a story he thinks is neat.
Yeah, exactly. This film opens up a lot of questions that don't get answers for the sake of progressing the story. I agree. I think he was more interested in telling a compelling story and an entertaining story than he was answering all of these questions that come up. And I think the complexity of this one, especially in comparison to the others, has a lot to do with his budget, considering how small Assault on Precinct 13's budget was and Halloween. By this point, he'd already done The Thing and Big Trouble in Little China and Escape from New York. Now he had a lot of money to play with to do the sort of things that he does in this film.
But he doesn't use it.
Yeah, I think he's limited to, the $3 million on this film because that was part of a deal that he had $3 million per film for a set of films, I believe.
Gotcha. Okay, so it really wasn't that much more money than he was used to working with.
I feel like at least half of that was swirling green goo.
Yeah.
And I'm you know me because I'm the poli-sci guy. I'm going to disagree with. Especially with The Thing and this, there's a lot of social political satire going on, and They Live especially.
Full disclosure, I've never seen They Live either.
That's one of my favorites.
Full, it's full, and yes, he does it in an entertaining way, and yes, he does it, and he crafts it where he's not giving. But no, this. Prince of Darkness is full of exposition. I was going to say that he doesn't do it with a ton of exposition, but there's a ton of exposition in this because it's a total commentary on science and faith.
And I think part of the reason the exposition-heavy elements of this film work, in my opinion, is because they're being delivered by scientists and grad students. There aren't any action heroes in this film. No one's ever going to show up with a machine gun to fight Satan. These are all people you would expect to hear these complex explanations from.
And doing the research on it, he was interested in the philosophy. He had just read about stuff and had just done research and had just been intrigued by a bunch of the philosophical bases that he uses in this movie. And so he wanted to explore that, and he wanted to explore it in a sense of how this affects human interaction in the sense of using very smart people and how they are taken over by, you know, things that they can't explain. You know, so the idea that he just wants to make entertaining movies, yes, agreed. They are very entertaining, including Assault on Precinct is one of the great action films of all time, but it's also frightening in the sense that, you know, you are alone, you know, and
Chris, I thought you were just going to unplug your headphones so you wouldn't have to listen to him anymore.
No,
That's really what that looked like.
I was adjusting it.
But the idea that he's commenting,
it's not,
and he's satirizing,
right? And I'm not saying he's not. I wasn't reducing what the movie was. I was just saying at the base of it, it's a fun story.
And you can go to Ghost of Mars, and you can go to
Never seen Ghost of Mars.
You can go to all this stuff later on, before he retired, because he was exhausted with the system. He was exhausted with, you know, having to challenge people on his stuff, and because people were not grasping or having conversations about his stuff. You know, it's like, because I am tired of putting my idea out there and not having it explored. Yes, he's not going to answer all the questions that he poses, but that's where it's supposed to be up to us as a society, is to do that. And he's a product of that, you know, 70s, you know, late 60s, 70s movie making, you know,
indie vibe.
And director is auteur, and director is as philosopher and poser of questions.
Yeah. Well, to that extent, and then this might be incorrect, because Neville, you brought up working within budget limitations, but I thought that I read he independently produced this one, because even as far back as '87, he was already getting tired of the system.
Yeah.
So,
It could be I misread that when I was doing some research.
It could be either way.
I mean, he had backers, and it's a Universal film. It's a Universal Studios produced movie. He was only allowed a certain amount of leeway budget wise, and the thing what he was able to put into this movie for the lack of money that he had, and the performances he got out. I mean, it couldn't have been they couldn't have been in production that long. You know, this was, you know, maybe 25-day shoot, maybe.
30.
30 days.
I did read that. It was 30 days.
Shoot, so still, you know, and so it's like he wasn't doing a lot of, you know, 18-take moments, you know, because they weren't using digital at that time. So he had to, if there's any kind of weird stunted acting going on, you know, stilted acting going on,
there are some questionable performances in the film.
But the thing is, they had 2 takes at the most to get it, and a lot of it was because they had to get to that ending, you know.
Speaking of that, a fun bit of trivia I read before we move on to our next topic. Apparently, the guy who plays Professor Lahai during his first scene with Professor Barak, that actor was not expecting Victor Wong to walk away in the middle of the scene. So his reaction to Barak just walking away from him as he's introducing himself was genuine, and I think that's hilarious.
Victor Wong was great, and he has to be related to some of, you know, like the guy who plays Wong in Doctor Strange movies, but because they're very similar in style. Well, I hope they are related in a way.
It's also great that Victor Wong gets to play probably the least racist character of his career, racist caricature in his career, as just a straightforward.
And he's super respected in this movie.
Yeah.
The people around him. I mean, even the amount of relationship he has with Donald Pleasance's priest, you know, their conversations, their relationship is very, very personable and friendly, and it's like, I respect your mind, I respect your faith, here's where we have common ground. It's just a relationship. That's where I didn't really talk about John Carpenter's growth. For me, it's like his presentation of, and all his stuff of faith and science, and, you know, what could be seen as polar opposites, the way he's able to even-handedly present ideas, polarizing ideas.
Man of science, man of faith.
Man of science, man of faith, and not have them, be diametrically opposed.
Diametrically?
Diametrically opposed.
Thank you for the assist, Chris. Barnes.
And I think that is a strong progression throughout his movies. And by the time he gets to The Ward, I think they're basically
Oh, God. The Ward was a
meshed.
terrible film.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, so we're going to move on to our second topic of discussion, which is the most sympathetic character in the film. And I've got IMDb pulled up so I don't screw up these names because,
Lord.
again, there are a shitload of characters in this movie of varying degrees of importance. And nearly all of them has something terrible happen to them. So I narrowed it down to just 4 people. Personally, if you've got an opinion on who gets fucked over more in this film, please contribute. But the 4 characters I feel who have it the worst. First, there's Calder, the poor guy who is painfully aware that he's been possessed by the Satan goo and goes so far as to cut his own throat with a piece of wood, and even that doesn't take. So there's number 1, Calder. Then there is Susan.
Who?
Thank you. Radiologist, glasses.
Radiologist,
No.
glasses.
The character who nobody remembers who she is in universe in
I
the
think
film.
arguably-
And she's
that's-
the hottest one.
I think arguably that's why she gets away with so much when she's possessed. No
Yeah.
one remembers who the hell she is.
The poor woman who, as I remember it, didn't actually get to do a whole hell of a lot before getting possessed by the Satan goo.
I made this point to Dave and Katie when we were watching yesterday. Her transformation in getting possessed is also the standard 80s geeky girl to hot girl transformation, because her hair gets teased up, her glasses disappear, and all of a sudden she's quote unquote different.
Yeah.
But her glasses disappears because she was knocked down when she got sprayed by the water goo.
Stan, I know.
The Satan goo?
I know.
But it was
Well, so yes.
so.
Yes, I know
So
she's on.
there's-
I know
It's
she's on auto
explainable.
evil at that
It
point.
is
Yes.
explainable why her glasses went away.
I don't need an explanation. I'm just saying they're gone. I know she's possessed. That's why she doesn't need the physical
Exactly.
limitation of glasses anymore.
Although I have to imagine losing her glasses probably
A
made it
man
more
was
difficult.
piloted by beetles.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I damn near put that guy on
That
there
was
too.
the greatest effect.
So number 1 was Calder. Number 2 was Susan. Number 3, I don't think his name actually ever gets said in the film, but it's on here on IMDb. Etchinson.
Yeah, there it is. I found it. Yeah, I'm looking at the Wikipedia thing. Etchison. He's the assistant for the other professor, right?
Yeah, the only one who's really allowed to leave, the first one to leave, and gets impaled by a broken bicycle by Alex Cooper.
Alice,
Excuse me,
and
Alice
it's actually
Cooper.
his stage prop.
Yeah. So there's that
Cleanly,
poor
too.
guy.
That's just a clean.
And just sort of stood there as I mean, I know he tried to turn and go the other way and found a bunch of homeless people.
And the other possessed people were like, no.
But he turned back and just sort of casually watched Alice Cooper approach and then impale him on a broken bicycle. So is it one of those
Didn't even
three?
say, like, excuse me, I need to get by.
Or is it poor Kelly, the woman who just wanted to take a goddamn nap for 15 minutes and instead becomes a vessel for Satan?
A literal.
Yeah, exactly. So, Neville, what do you think of those 4 characters, or maybe another one if you have thoughts, but who's the most sympathetic? Who got screwed over the worst for this science experiment?
Yeah, the guy outside with the insects. That was that was the harshest. Yeah, you sympathize a little bit more with the one guy who's getting to leave and then gets stopped by with the homeless people, because even he has the look of I'm screwed, and so there you identify that a little bit, but just the other one's a bit just cringeworthy. It's like, okay, that's just a bad way to go. That's not quick. That's just
Stabbed to death by a homeless person and then possessed by beetles.
yeah.
Well,
There is-
he was disloyal.
Oh,
I don't know if that can be sympathetic. He was disloyal. He was ready to, he was ready to.
Some would call it
he was
smart.
ready to vanquish
He's
everybody
like,
else.
I don't know what's going on in that building, but I'm done with it. I'm leaving.
My,
Oh, hi, Susan.
I think the only person that didn't really and I you know who I'm surprised that didn't get fucked over was
Porn
Walter.
stash? Oh.
Walt. Oh yeah, the
And
Mr. Homosexual Panic?
And I have
My doctor just says it's homosexual panic. What? What was going on in the 80s?
But it just sounds like he's refusing to out himself. And there's a joke about that later, too.
Because she really didn't do anything to the one that Walter was after, that said, you could almost pass for Asian.
Yeah, Lisa. I almost put her on the list, too.
Lisa would have been...
Lisa got it just...
But she... And she almost got kissed by Susan. But that was my question, is why did Carpenter save the kill for what's his face?
Wasn't that Calder? Calder,
yeah, it would have been Calder.
Calder got the evil juice down the throat.
Yeah, shouldn't have that been Lisa in my mind.
Well, I almost included Lisa just for the fact that the poor woman was only there to translate some Latin.
And she could translate some Latin.
She translated the hell out of some Latin, but apostate of Satan instead.
But after that translation, wouldn't she want to leave? Wouldn't she want to be the first person to know, hey, this is really bad?
Yeah, I would drop off my translation on my way out the door. Like, oh, hey, so it turns out Jesus is an alien. That green goo is Satan.
But she is a scientist, so she was willing to hang out and see where this went, because that was her, and she was going to get a great recommendation for her doctorate.
But you can't feel sorry for her then, because she chose to stay in a situation that had those risks.
No, made her more heroic.
See, for me, it wouldn't have even been. It would have been a phone call. Like Barack would have answered the phone, and I'd been like, "So hey, I'm on my way home, but turns out green goo is Satan. Jesus was an alien.
Turns out I can translate books from there too."
Yeah. I'm doing just fine from home.
They had awesome computers for that time.
Have fun
for that time, yeah. It's hilarious watching them wheel in all that shit that would probably be laptops now.
Right.
Have fun with the Satan goo juice spitting Dilophosaurs that everyone's turning into.
Yeah. Chris Barnes, most sympathetic character?
Of the ones you listed, I'm going to go with Etchison. Calder is a close second just because he gets it so bad, but I had to take, quote-unquote, points off because he has no peripheral vision. Yeah. There are several situations where he and at least one other, I think it is Walter, they don't look out of the corner of their eye. With evil's right here.
Well, it doesn't get any more classic horror than not being able to see the thing directly next to you.
Or ever swiveling your head slightly.
Because Walter falls victim to that later when he walks into the room and he sees Kelly on the bed, has absolutely no idea that Lisa and Susan are standing right next to him.
Right. It's like, why are you not looking around?
I would, honestly, I feel for Dr. Leahy, possibly too, because Etchison is the one who's most sympathetic because he literally came in as a favor to Dr. Leahy, just like, I'm helping everybody set everything up, and I'm just going to go home. You guys,
and I think there's mention of he's going to be. Doesn't he say he's going to be covering Leahy's classes? Too.
Yeah, he's doing favors for Dr. Leahy.
And which one is the chuckling
Dr. Leahy?
The one who's giggling creepily.
Yeah, the one that goes to the mirror.
That's Calder.
Yeah,
that's Calder.
That's Calder.
Okay, who?
Dr. Leahy was the one who was whistling the cartoon music in the break room when he was getting food.
Who's then? That's the one that got the kiss kill.
No, Calder. That's Calder.
The black guy.
Yeah.
No, Calder came up already possessed from.
No.
When he was fighting Lisa and Susan.
Yeah, they pin him to the ground.
And Susan
kisses him and vomits green goop into his throat. Leahy is one of the last ones to go.
Yeah, he
makes it almost to the end.
Okay.
And I don't think this character's name ever gets said. Lomax is the guy whose neck gets broken by
the guy who looks
Susan.
like a henchman from an action film.
The Dirk Blocker guy.
No. Dirk Blocker is Mullins.
Who's the one?
You thought that I was kidding when I said there were a fuck ton of characters in this movie.
Who is the one that went back downstairs to get Susan and then gets his neck broken?
Yeah, that's Lomax.
That's Lomax.
Yeah.
And
played by Ken Wright, who doesn't even have a picture on IMDb.
And who does Dirk Blocker play?
Is he Beetle Guy?
Is
Mullins Beetle Guy?
Is he Beetle? He might be Beetle Guy. Okay.
Beetle Guy.
Beetlejuice?
Beetle Guy.
Beetlejuice?
Stop that. All right, so my pick for the who gets it the worst in this film, I am going to go with Calder, just because of how aware he is and how much he's trying to fight being possessed.
His performance, and actually Leahy's also mimics that, where it's like they're up and they're moving, and it's like you can tell in their expressions is like, I don't want to be doing this. Mm-hmm. And Calder is staring at himself in that mirror.
Well, yeah, and Calder edges out for me just because how creepily he swings between giggling, like that high-pitched, very unnerving giggle, to almost sobbing, especially when he's standing there looking at himself in the mirror. So for me, yeah, it's got to be poor Calder. And Leahy's a second because he like you said, Chris Barnes, he is aware.
Yeah.
Whereas none of the other people seem to be. Lisa and Susan.
Yeah, Susan was merely basically like Satan's literal tool.
Yeah. You're going to remember who I am now, assholes.
Susan and Lisa were like the
it was like
homeless.
He had direct control over them, and then like Leahy and Calder, they were like, he's like Sims, go do this.
Yeah. Well, he did. So the canister vomits a whole lot of that stuff into Susan, and then she passes more of it onto other people. I think it's possible that
there's something
weird. What about
weird.
the Kelly vomit?
There was something
into the eyes.
Weird about what they talk about that canister early on when they were studying it, and they say it's locked from the inside.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah, so Satan put himself in there as some goo and then locked it himself.
Why?
Actually, no, I don't think that's true,
it was
because
the priests of the sect, the Brotherhood of Sleep, trapped him.
Yeah,
that's why they put the lock on the inside, is so that nobody on the outside can get in and release.
But Satan's in there.
But Brotherhood of Sleep
just don't put a lock on it, or don't put a way to open it at all.
The Brotherhood of Sleep is that they had to find people that would not be influenced by whatever power emanated from the canister, and it's like if the lock was on the outside, they would be, if somebody got thralled by, one of the priests, one of the Brotherhood got thralled by, they could unlock it. So they made sure that it was permanently trapped, and that the only way they could move this entity was physically move and it obviously took 4 people to move that.
And yet no one thought to waterproof it.
Yeah. All right. Well.
Yeah, but I'm sure they didn't have waterproofing 3 million years ago.
They were able to design a tall canister that locked from the inside.
and create water flow around the ceiling.
Yeah, I do love the anti-gravity effect that this thing seems to have, that it is dripping upwards. Every time we see it, it is coating the ceiling and not the floor in antimatter.
And I liked, when it shoots, that they were able to see the change in energy focus. So when it shot the directed spray into Susan the first time, he was like, there was an energy surge, and it was a precise laser shot form. And so it's like the idea that got picked up, and that wasn't just a watery or a goo type stuff, but it was an energy.
Yeah, it registered on their scale that they've got because of the amount of psychokinetic energy the goo was giving off. What I was trying to say earlier about how much it vomited into, or not really vomited, that's later, but how much the goo sprayed into Susan. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's interesting. We're talking about Calder and Leahy, being aware of being possessed while the other ones weren't. And I'm thinking now that it's probably because Susan was running out of goop by the time she got to them, having put some into Lisa.
She needed a strategic Satan reserve?
Basically, yeah. Like she had a certain amount in her that she then passed on to the others.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, completely non-canon or just head canon.
I'll buy it in the context of this movie.
And this is nitpicking because we're supposed to.
Now we're nitpicking. Okay.
We're supposed to suspend our belief, like at moment 1 in this, but the idea that it took. Is it because the scientists were supposedly smart or whatever? It didn't take that energy blast of the goop to enthrall the homeless. they were just done by whatever energy was emanating from the church.
Yeah.
According to Wikipedia, it's because they were schizophrenic.
And it tied into that.
Well, and also
Because that's kind of how the alien voices got into the people's dreams, right? Was through that idea that it was affecting their
Brainwaves,
dreamscapes,
yeah.
and their brainwaves.
Yeah, and I mean, it has the same effect even without the goo. What the goo is directly influencing them in the hive mind way, the same way that it's influencing the ant hills
Right.
that we see throughout, just the pile of bugs, the beetles.
Which was a great effect, too.
And it's capable of kind of, I don't want to say long range transmission that way, because when they're looking at those graphs, Brian, who we haven't mentioned yet, Porn Stash, he
I could
mentions
literally talk the entire length of that film about his mustache.
I
was
know,
wonderful.
buddy. Except for the fact that it was slightly
Uneven.
longer on one side than it was
It
on
was
the other.
slightly off, and no one did anything about it.
He's oh my God, he was with Gerald McCraney in
Simon and Simon.
Simon and Simon. That was A.J. Simon.
Interesting. Did not
Ended
know
up
that.
playing A.J. Simon because of that movie.
But he mentions, if I'm remembering correctly, and again, Chris, Neville, you watched it last night. Doesn't he say when they're looking at the graphs that there was something like that 2 weeks prior that they got a spike in energy? I feel like that's it probably when the possession around them started.
That's a good point. Yes.
That I can't remember. So I might have missed that.
Yeah, and again, like I pointed out, we all did just watch this recently, and so it sounds like we should know these things right off bat. A lot of shit happens
It
in
does.
this movie.
There's a lot of info.
All the characters that we listed off that have names, they're maybe said once.
In all the characters that we've talked about so far, we haven't mentioned two of the main ones, which are Brian, aka Porn Stash, who's one of the main protagonists, and then his girlfriend, Catherine.
Catherine, and again, they don't have last names. They must have taken it from the script to put it on Wikipedia, but her last name is Danforth.
Catherine Danforth.
It's just a great last name.
Which is great because that's the only way they refer to her in the plot summary. Danforth. I forgot it was a woman for reading halfway through.
And they go to school at Keene University, which is modeled on the Lovecraft.
Yep, and she's named after a Lovecraftian character.
Yeah,
there's a lot of references to Lovecraft in here.
I feel like he sped along. One, because they took a while for the action to actually start. He really sped up their romance.
Oh yeah.
But I also thought for what it is, they took a long time establishing it.
Oh, yes.
He did stalking. And
things in general did not pick up.
No, it was a very 80s romance in its progression.
But I mean, Carpenter did take time introducing the romance and getting it in so that when it got to their familialness in the church, that it wasn't out of nowhere. There was enough time taken with it to establish that they are together.
Okay.
Sort of, but they do go on a date one night and wake up in bed next to each other the next morning.
Well, and that
supposedly
scene
that
was
was
preceded by them having the conversation where he pisses her off while holding the playing card. Then it goes to him meeting her outside that building on that evening scene.
But remember, they had coffee a couple times before that. There was a time.
Not even a little.
Because even after he pisses her off with the card, they still go to coffee, and then they go to coffee a couple more times, and that's where when he meets her after class, and she's like, "Oh, you want to go to coffee again?" And so then they finally have their first night together.
I think you're absolutely right that was established through dialogue that the time was taken.
Yeah.
More than showing it.
There was, and that's why I'm saying he did use the exposition to establish.
We were told and not shown.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So.
Okay, this is. Sorry to just jump in.
It's okay.
So is Mullins the guy who was trapped in the room with Birak and Catherine and Brian?
Yeah, the poor guy whose name we never knew.
That guy, he's there for almost the entire movie. He said, I mean, aside from his scene with Calder and guy who gets eaten by beetles, he has no real contribution other than to eventually die once they start storming in that room.
And because he has the conversation with them before Beetle guy is
the longer I realized he'd been in that room and hadn't said anything in a while, I was like, he's dead.
Because he's one of the people that Leahy brings in, right?
I think.
And so it's like he's there specifically to read stuff. So he does have a couple moments with Brian where he reads the information off the computers, or off the graphs. He has
to Carpenter's
one or two
credit,
scenes.
that's not necessarily a bad thing. I was thinking about that because in a modern movie, they would try to give all these characters moments so it means something when they die. But it's like it's just a team of researchers.
Exactly.
And things go horribly wrong. It's like they're not all quote unquote memorable people.
Yeah. All right. So this third topic of discussion could either take 5 minutes or it could be the rest of the podcast. We're going to find out what happens. And you're going to find out alongside with us, listeners, the religious implications behind the discoveries made in this movie.
I think before we get to the implications, we need to try and just lay out what exactly the theology is now according to this movie.
So when the researchers get to the church, Lisa's whole job being there is to translate this text that they find next to the canister that's written in Latin. And what she translates is that Jesus was an alien. We've joked about this a couple times so far, but it's pretty important to the meta plot. He came to Earth to warn people about Satan, who was the son of the anti-god, who was roaming the Earth. They
did also say that the evil folk were humans. It wasn't like this other entity, spiritual entity. They were part of and that they may have been made of humans in a way, but it was the fully formed evil form of human is what they...
Yeah, and Lisa specifically says that the race of aliens that Jesus belonged to was very human-like.
And that too, yes.
That the anti-god roamed the earth millions of years ago and had a son who Jesus came to earth to warn everyone about and to try to stop. And that the Brotherhood of Sleep, the earliest indication of what we would, I guess, now call Christianity, was founded to keep Satan locked up and warn everyone of the danger he presents.
And they banished the anti-god who was in the antimatter dimension.
Yeah. This is why I started this
Everybody
off by talking about prisoners trying to break into a police station. Serial killer is stalking babysitters on Halloween night. This criminal needs to break into New York to rescue the president. Jesus was an alien.
Let's reframe the entirety of Christianity real quick.
Yeah, like it just goes off the rails very quickly when she starts translating.
Basically, that story translates to alien fights demons.
Yeah.
But remember also at this time you had the show In Search Of, and you had Leonard Nimoy doing whole episodes about, what were the first peoples, the first Christians, the first whatever,
right.
And the whole idea of the pyramids were originally landing craft.
Oh, you mean the History Channel today?
Aliens.
But In Search Of did it much, much better. And having Leonard
They didn't try
Nimoy
to
as
fool
authoritative voice was a much better ploy. But there was a lot of science based in Search Of, and so the questions, and that's why I was saying this was science fiction, more science fiction than religious horror. In the sense,
well, I mean, it's pretty heavily both.
I think they're multitasking.
Yeah, but what the religiousness comes out of the fact that the humans on Earth had to figure out a way to rationalize the aliens,
the alien savior.
And so they created a god myth. They created a creation myth. They create, which we are still debating, and we will debate forever. But the idea that at that time in the 80s, religion as a... And that's when L. Ron Hubbard started getting really...
Scientologists
started getting really...
that had been a plan for decades because they've been slowly infiltrating.
But that at that time,
obviously,
in the mid-80s, that's actually when it was starting boom, 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 and the whole Dianetics, the whole... we are filled with alien DNA, whatever.
Alien souls.
That all became really super popular at that time. That's why I'm going back to my sort of disagreement with the fact that Carpenter was making a comment okay, yes, I may be a man of God, I may believe in a supreme being, but there is science to go with as well. And
well, that's the whole purpose of Barack's team being there in the church.
Well,
Neville,
I mean, Catholics as a whole kind of are very much in the sense of they're very much pro science.
I agree.
At least now, at least in the modern age.
And I thought Donald Pleasant's representation of that of the priesthood being scientific, or being open to rationalization, and because he had that great speech, and he would get angry, he would get so angry, and he said, "Well, we should have did a better job."
Yeah,
keeping him in check, and it's because that was our job and we failed. And he was mad at his people, mad at his profession, that it's not necessarily to teach people about God, it's to keep evil in check. And the evil that science can't explain completely, that's our job to keep that in check, whether it's by exorcism or by baptism or
stop karate chopping the desk.
I haven't touched it.
Yes, you have.
But the idea, and so I really loved, and you brought up the priest may have been Neville may brought up the point that the name of the priest may have been Loomis, and connect him with Halloween Loomis. And what he did in Halloween.
That's just fan canon.
It's just fan canon, but the idea that that's connected.
Fanon,
because he was very similar.
I might.
As the Halloween Loomis, so it's like, and how he responded to Michael Myers scientifically, and so to make him the priest, I think is a very, very, very awesome thing.
It depends on which version of Halloween you're looking at, whether it's the originals or the sequels, because Father Loomis rejected any idea that there was just something mentally wrong with Michael in the first film, and just outright says that he's just plain evil. That is definitely more man of faith than man of science. It's not he's psychotic, he's a sociopath. Michael is pure evil. And anyway,
but he does make that make that decision in the idea that he's already done the rationalizations, that there's no other explanation that I can base in rational reality. So it's like the fact that he is pure evil.
Yeah.
So faith was the secondary.
Sorry, we interrupted. Once long ago, we were going to throw it to Neville.
Yes, Neville. On a large scale, the religious implications. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I guess I took it differently than most people. I am a Christian, but, looking at it, I just saw this as of him, Carpenter, liking some of the science he was looking into and saying, hey, what if this happened like this? So it's like, now you're kind of translating a little bit. Now you've got evil that's always been there, but here's the reason for that. Now you've got Christ, but here's the reason for that, and here's how people acted because of it. But it wasn't digging too deep with it. I don't think. It was just a matter of, let's just take a different view of this, like a what if, but not trying to just scrutinize it and break it down or trying to justify it. It was just more of a liking science and being curious about a story like that, and using something that was already very established, the religion, to say, okay, what if the same thing existed, but now it came about this way, but was but people kind of, like you said, had to make justification for it in a way they could understand.
Mm-hmm. I agree with what you're saying, because as we were talking about it, it made me think of them seeing the alien Jesus and interpreting it as the Christ. Also made me think of, like, of course, well, that makes sense because of how Christianity still deals with revelation today.
Exactly.
The final revelation, and people are still trying to interpret what that means, because I remember being taught, like, we don't know what exactly John saw, and he was trying to interpret it the best he could, seeing these things that he could never comprehend.
So
before.
otherworldly.
So otherworldly. He was trying to comprehend it and explain it to other people at the same time, and it's that kind of thing. It was like you saw an alien come down and defeat this monstrous evil, and it's like that has to be the Christ. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So what you're saying is the six-horned goat from Revelation is also an alien.
Could. You can't rule it out because people have tried to apply it to so many things, and they say it's got to be this or it's got to be that. We're still not, they still haven't gotten really close to it.
Yeah, and I really like that explanation because there is that scene where Barack and Father Loomis, we'll call him, are talking, and the father is lamenting the fact that it seems like they've gotten everything wrong, and these new revelations just cast so much down on him, and Barack outright tells him, it is essentially correct. The details might be wrong, but your religion still has a firm basis. I just think it's fascinating how you can take the idea and turn it on its head completely and still have it be essentially correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any more thoughts from anybody but Stan on the religious implications here? No?
Anti-Satan had big hands. I mean,
yes,
anti-gods.
Anti-God.
Anti-gods.
Who exists as apparently antimatter. A lot of big concepts here.
Also, what did Satan possess? I forgot her name. Stacy? Was it Stacy?
Kelly.
Kelly. What did Satan possess Kelly think was going to happen when she tried to get her fingers through the makeup mirror?
It wasn't big enough.
And,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we all figured that out.
Because she saw the mirror. Oh, I can do it. And
well, the poor girl was sleep deprived.
I think it was a revelation of the character. Oh, here's an access to the doorway.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then then after that, it's like you got to find a bigger one.
Got to find a bigger one, and I think that was the main reason for Calder's possession was to lead.
True. That is true. I think
Bigger.
through Calder is how they figured out the big mirror, but also when Kelly it's like we got to find a bunch of these tiny
bigger
compact
is
ones.
better.
We need to someone turn back. We got to get a shitload of dimes. Kelly, after being fully possessed, after drinking all that Ecto Cooler,
Oh wow!
rising up and giggling like a toddler. Like a sleep-deprived toddler.
Well, she's so pleased once she discovers her telekinetic powers that the other ones don't really seem to possess that much. But then again, she gets all of the ectoplasm.
That's true.
And what's funny is that she just has them go break in to get Walter.
Like, all right,
when she could have just
I broke that door a little bit.
Yeah, I know. She could have ripped the whole wall off.
Well, priorities.
No.
She had to bring Dad back.
No, but the thing is, she waited there for them to dig for a while, and they still had a brick wall. The humans still had a brick wall to cross.
Well, she didn't seem to be in too terribly much of a hurry because the goo is eating her alive. She's getting progressively worse, and it just seems to me like, oh shit, I need to go let Dad in before my body falls apart.
It did prove that, it did show that Carpenter did use all his special effects money on things.
Oh, yeah.
His special effects budget was kind of small for this when it could have been pretty big. But I
don't think it needed to be big because her rotting corpse.
It was
as
still
Kelly
effective.
Is still, yeah.
But it wasn't like it wasn't the Thing quality. It wasn't Homeboy Tom Savini style. Stan Winston style. Effects with that the Thing had. It's like because the Thing effects were like reality. And so you would think that if the anti-god was infesting your body, that I did like the pregnant effect and how it progressively went from her being fully pregnant and then as she progressed into her just the ugly
fully possessed
form, that the stomach got smaller and smaller and smaller. But the thing is, Walter never reacted to that. He never told the other people on the other side of the wall.
What do you see?
She has a really big stomach right now, but now it's gone.
Yeah, I was like, it was like they say specifically, what do you see? And he just talks about the two possessed women standing there. I'm sorry, you're watching one of your fellow researchers melt.
Yeah, specifically when he was in class with, like Catherine, Brian, Walter, Kelly, they were all part of the same class.
That's right. Yes.
And then he waits a long time before he finally decides, hey, I'll start chipping at this wall.
Yeah.
He stands there for the longest, and then
then
when it's really
95% of
bad,
that work.
then when it's really bad, it's like, okay, they're really about to get me. You're not here yet. I'll try something.
That was a really
I
strong
guess I'll help.
flashlight, too.
Walter was an ass. Let's just say it.
He was asshole-ish.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. It's hard to... Walter was definitely not going to go on the who do you feel worse for list.
But,
Although I have to
he
admit,
did go for police. He did go for the first
He did,
responders
yeah.
at the end.
I just that does remind me. I do lose a few more sympathy points for Calder because when he walks in on possessed Lisa doing the quote unquote translating, she's sitting just jabbing keys, looking up and to the left, not blinking, which is like all of the possessed people who get like Susan and Lisa, they stop blinking when they're on screen. If you don't notice that.
Do you think that was taken from The Shining by chance?
I don't know, but she's just staring slightly off to the left, not blinking. I live, and he gets closer for some reason.
Well, yeah, obviously you have to read the insanity that she's typing. I should have looked it up, the full text, but it says, I live a whole bunch of times, and then your God will not save you.
No, what was it? Yeah, you're
Jesus.
right.
The Holy Ghost will not
Ghost
save
will save
you.
you.
The God Plutonium will
will
not
not
save
save
you.
you.
In fact, nothing will save you. Which, is...
Which was more effective than I thought, because the technology is so dated now, that was a very effective moment for me.
Mm-hmm.
That
it's also because it's more of a complete thought than anything we've been presented with up to that point, because we've had the zombie-like homeless people.
It's the only time you are communicated to directly by Satan.
Aside from the
you are. I mean,
the possessed body that turns in. That's
the Beatles.
The Beetle Man.
I have some news you're not going to want to hear.
Yeah, I love that line because
Remarkably, that's when his acting gets better.
When he's possessed, it's just such an ominous line. I have something to tell you, and you're not going to like it.
And then his
you're
head
all going
falls
to die.
off from the Beatles, and then his
head
legs
falls
fall
off. Yeah.
and then his head falls off. And I was like, that was in a really, but still, I still think he used any ounce of budget he had for special effects for the thing, because even
his head just falls backwards off of his body, and then it just collapses. All right, so we talked about the religious implications.
I want to be in the meeting when he says, I'm going to need a lot of Beatles.
Also,
real ones.
Yeah, and also, where was PETA on that one? Does PETA just not care about Beatles? Because they're stomping the shit out of those things.
I don't know if the ASPCA or whoever watches. I think they weren't as strict at that point, because there was an incident where they started paying more, like they started being even harsher, or being on set all the time. So they probably weren't on set.
A whole bunch of Beatles. No one cares about those. But all right, let's talk about the ending. So specifically, everything that happens after after Catherine pushes Kelly/Satan through the mirror into the antimatter dimension.
Again, very dramatic, not really necessary.
Yeah, Catherine could have just given her a hard shove.
Or a kick.
But specifically, I want to find out what your interpretations are of that ending, because the whole Brotherhood of Sleep thing is predicated on a vision that everybody within a certain radius to this canister of Satan goo receives. And as the movie goes on, you see more and more of the dream, of the vision that they are having through their dreams from the year 1999. They never say 1999.
Prince warned us.
Yeah. Somebody in 1999 is recording an ominous figure coming out of the church that they are all at and telling them, this is what you're actually receiving. We are beaming this through time into your consciousness. And the scientists offer up an explanation that it might be tachyons, which are particles that move faster than light, which technically means they're traveling backwards through time. So somebody from the year 1999 is transmitting a pre-recorded message back to the brains of anybody in the vicinity of this goo. That is such a fucking insane high concept for a horror movie. And again, like I keep going back to, from the guy who had not been making really high concept films up to that point.
Well, he made Dark Star.
I've never seen Dark Star.
Previous to that.
Was that as high concept as this?
Well, I mean, it was a low budget space opera, so in response to Star Wars, but I mean, but for what it could have been, it was
Dark Star
a comedy.
predates Star Wars.
Was Dark Star before?
Yeah, 75. Star Wars is 77. Let me double check myself on that real quick.
Star Wars was responding to Dark Star, I guess, and that's
yes, that was it specifically.
But the idea that
show you John Carpenter.
He had the knowledge, but I mean, it definitely wasn't as crafty as anything afterwards, because it was really super low budget.
Yeah, Dark Star was 74.
So what were we responding to?
It wasn't a response to anything. It was
to
just
Star Trek, I guess.
We'll go with
sure.
that. Anyway, so the vision that everyone receives throughout the film is an ominous dark figure that we don't see many details of coming out of the church. Then after Catherine pushes possessed Kelly Satan through the mirror, and it seems like everything is resolved, Brian Pornstash has a nightmare in which it is Catherine, his sort of
we got to say that
ex-girlfriend.
Catherine followed when she pushed.
Yeah,
Kelly,
she went through the mirror
went
with Kelly.
And
tackled
the mirror,
her into the mirror.
And
again, could have just given her a hard shove, but
Father
no,
Loomis
she
threw
committed.
the axe and broke the mirror to seal.
Yeah, let's talk about just real quickly talk about his old man strength and his sudden
he was penned
axe throwing skills.
Well, he did the prayer. And he asked for strength to survive.
I think we did see a character who had a religious faith. Then bringing the scientific in there, there was some struggle with him. He wanted it. Mm-hmm. He originally brought them in for credibility, for a worldview to accept what would be hard to be accepted.
He even said that you have to be the ones to explain this to the world.
Yeah, exactly. But I think he also had a crisis of faith. But in the end, he was able to get past that, so that's his character. Finally, we see he's the story's about him. It's his. We introduced him to the beginning. We see his conflict throughout, and then the resolution is him returning back to his faith to defeat this. To him, he has just defeated evil. He's laying there from the ambulance, truly believing that's what he's done.
We pushed evil back.
Right.
We did
with the power of the holy fire axe.
With the power, but the idea that he was trapped in whatever that was, I guess it was some kind of.
It was like some kind of large safe that he had been hiding behind, because Calder went into that same. That's where the large mirror was.
Yeah,
Calder had wandered in, and he was behind there.
And possessed Kelly pushed the safe against him, and so, but he still had the strength, and I do believe it was from his faith and doing the prayer and getting the strength from
you pin me with a safe, I throw an axe. It's the Catholic way.
And he threw the axe to seal the door. He didn't use it to save Catherine at all, but the idea that he knew that it was Catherine's place to make the sacrifice.
Yeah.
And that his job in this was to do nothing but to throw that axe and seal the door.
Yeah, stop the evil he saw.
Exactly. I don't think he planned on the idea of Catherine pushing through with her. I think he was just waiting for someone to push. Once he realized that the mirror was the gateway, he was waiting on someone to push Kelly through, get Kelly through there, and so he could. Because I'm sure, in a reasonable explanation, he was probably trying to gather his strength and get an arc or something so that he could toss the axe.
Mm-hmm. Who was the one that chopped off Kelly's arm and then it grew back? It was
that was him.
That was him.
That was
Father Loomis.
Before he was trapped, right?
Yep.
And then
he was trying his damnedest to murder Satan.
Yeah, he chops off her arm. He's like, got her.
Chop off her head.
Again.
She picks it up. She doesn't. Okay, she regrows the arm that gets cut off. He cuts off her head, and then rather than regrowing it, she just reaches down and picks it up. And
that was a power
move.
That was
Reanimator thing.
That was
that
was just to show you. He was like, I can do this all day.
That was a fuck you from Satan.
But it was for me, that was a super effective moment to show the strength, and then it totally influenced him, Father Loomis, and allowed him to gain the strength, and say, okay, So somebody has to do something other than dismember this person. They need to get it back into the portal. I need to close it.
It was a final boss battle because it's like you go in there, you try to hurt the boss, and it's like nothing's working. Oh crap! That means I'm going to have patterns happen.
I know we're making it smaller than it is, but I think it was a very effective ending boss battle for what this movie was, the budget it had, the constraints it had.
Well, small is actually kind of important here because you realize the fate of the world is being decided in this one tiny church.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Closed off from the world.
And there was even something said earlier to Father Loomis by one of the homeless people, thank you for reopening the church.
Oh, yeah.
That moment was really powerful for me because, and the fact that he just knew that.
He knows something's up because he sees inside the cup with the maggots.
Exactly. And so to go back to Neville's point that his crisis of faith culminates in that moment when he realizes I can't kill him directly, I can't destroy him directly, there has to be another thing. And so Catherine provides that last moment, and so instead of saving Catherine by continuing to fight,
he saves everybody.
He knows the next best move is destroy that mirror.
He knows, just like Christ, there has to be a sacrifice for the savior of mankind as a whole, and Catherine provides that sacrifice. And the fact that Catherine realizes the Miss Scientist, super scientist, because she was probably the smartest of them all.
Well, she just knows whatever's coming through cannot.
And the fact that she liked numbers so much, and that she was deciphering all those ancient number figures. And
the derivatives.
At one point, she says it's like a language and it's beyond me.
Yeah, and that they didn't have they hadn't discovered differential equations, and so that made it that even. So the idea that.
Thank you. Not derivatives, differential equations.
Differential equations.
I knew it started with a D,
which was probably the Walter character's most defining realization in that movie was the fact that we hadn't invented differential equations yet 3 million years ago, but or even 2,000 years ago. But so there was a lot, Neville, that led up to what you're saying is that yes, he was Father Loomis was dependent on the science to be the representation to the world at large, and that all this was brought out and explained, and the numbers were there, and so all the stuff that needed to be done rationally was there, but that allowed him to grow and to respond to his crisis of faith, and to be I can't save Catherine, but the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And again, a lot of this stuff has been explained in Star Trek stuff.
Oh my God! We're not talking about Star Trek.
No, but the idea is there.
So after that, comes the second iteration of the dream, where Brian wakes up from having seen the rest of the video from the year 1999, where instead of a shadowy figure coming out of the church, it's Catherine. So let's start with Chris Neville. Your thoughts on the ending?
Well, that says that they failed, that they've only postponed it because we know that the son uses people, doesn't have his own form. So with her coming out, you pretty much know that's what that is, and that's always through all those visions, the figure kept getting a little bit more defined, but you never knew it until the end, and so that was your reveal of. That's what had really happened the whole time. Is this had all, it was they had failed. They thought the priest thought he had won, and everyone thought it was over, but they had really failed because they just hadn't gotten enough of the dream to see it, and he had finally gotten far enough where he could.
So you think it was always Catherine that was coming out of that church?
Yes, I think it always was.
Okay. Chris Barnes, your thoughts?
I think it's one of two things. Either because she was trapped in the dimension, she was taken over, and she possibly was going to come back out somehow because she was sealed in there with them until the next possible escape. Or because towards the end they kind of... I think with the makeup mirror it helps clearly define that only imbued with Satan's full gooey essence, that that you can
Nothing
actually
you said is technically wrong.
that you can unlock the portal. So, sorry, I started having to fight laughter because I remembered whenever was it Kelly again? Kelly?
Yeah, the one who gets possessed.
Yeah, whenever.
Fully, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever she spoke. I'm sorry, I just started remembering whenever she Father.
Yeah. Yeah.
But my point was going to be my alternate interpretation of that is, well, he's got severe PTSD. Maybe that is a dream about him not being able to. It could also be a dream about him not being able to save her.
Yeah.
That now he sees the figure as her, as being doomed, because he also immediately wakes up from that dream, is trying to calm down and rolls over into her disfigured, ugly face.
Yeah.
And then, because again, at the end, he gets up and he's looking at the mirror at the end of the movie and he starts reaching toward it when it cuts to black. But again, and it works as a good tense, what the fuck's gonna happen moment. But
cliffhanger, yeah.
But again, they established only fully possessed was that key. Was it gonna unlock? And he wasn't.
But neither was Catherine, and she was able to fight. Was it because Catherine wasn't either? But
Kelly had her hand in pulling out Anti-God's hand at that time.
Right. So basically, the doorway was open.
She was
and
the
locked.
key. Yeah.
Okay. So
I feel
it didn't close on Catherine because she was still connected to to the.
I feel like the thread is still there, but it was in that instance closed, and I think it could still happen again. But I don't know. I think in that instance he's just severely traumatized.
Stan, thoughts on the ending?
I'm like halfway between Chris and Barnes and Neville.
I just think he's
between two Chris's.
I just think it's going to stay with him again until 1999, which is 12 years away.
What they did was change prophecy because I don't think the 1999 folks knew about Catherine doing the sacrifice. I don't think they expected that, and so.
Well, I mean, they just sent back an image. No one could see enough of that image to see it was Catherine. It was always her that whole time.
You think?
Yeah, no, they just couldn't see it.
Because at that time they would have had.
Yeah, because for them it was all the past.
That was
so they had it. It was just a matter of they didn't get enough footage to people to get her out that door to see who it was.
But why wouldn't they have given the dream of Catherine earlier?
They were sending a video message, so the people were only receiving part of it. So it's like the closer you got to these time periods, the more they were able to get.
They were essentially faxing something through time.
I guess what you're saying is that they can only send enough information so the prophecy would happen. So they could, and then so when Catherine becomes the vessel, then they give the full information.
No, it was always done. It was always everything that happened was passed for the people that were sending the message back.
But the thing is, if they would have killed Catherine earlier in the movie,
but we don't know it was anybody who knew Catherine or the other people. It's just a matter of all we know is they have this footage of the evil emerging finally from its place. We don't know anything, so we can't tie anything to it. It's just, here's this evil coming loose. You guys in the past got to stop it.
That's what I'm saying, is that if they knew that it was Catherine in the future,
they wouldn't know at what point it was Catherine, though. I mean,
but they could have given the information, but the thing is, if we would have killed, if the scientists would have taken care of Catherine, the 1999 people don't exist. Is that what we're saying here? Is that if the Catherine doesn't, there's no need to warn folks in the past about this. So
what you're saying is if they had been presented with the full video, if it was always Catherine, and if somebody dreaming got to see the whole thing, they could have theoretically woken up and been like, oh shit, we got to kill Catherine right now.
Once everybody,
because that opens up a whole new can of worms.
Saying is that,
can you trust a dream sent back through time as a basis to murder someone?
That's because the prophecy was there that there's an evil going to be bringing back the father. But when Catherine sacrifices herself, because nobody, even Pornstash had no expectation for Catherine to do that sacrifice. I don't think Father Loomis knew there was going to be that sacrifice.
No one did, no.
So the thing that she did that sacrifice was totally altruistic and selfless. So that changed the prophecy, that changed the future. So when Pornstache gets the vision that yes, and this goes into Barnes's, is that because she goes in, she becomes the new vessel, and so that's what they say. Okay, yeah, you did it. You fixed it for that moment in time, but now there's a new threat. It's like Catherine is now.
I gotcha.
I think the new threat stems from the fact that Satan has returned to the antimatter dimension. That's my theory, at least off the top of my head.
Yeah, he never came out of it.
Because he. Well, I mean, his essence is returned to
his
because it was trapped. I think it was trapped here, and it could only do the low level type of machinations that it was doing in the movie.
Yes.
So that's probably the newer thread.
I just don't see it changing at all. I mean, ultimately, if you don't know anybody and you're there in '99 and you're filming it, you're just a reporter. You're just saying this is what happened. So Catherine doing all that. That's what happened to get you to where you were in '99.
No, it's a stable time loop.
So there's no change.
I can see it being a stable time loop.
So if it's a stable time loop, then that means they do know it's Catherine, but they can't give the full information.
Well, if you notice, every time we see somebody having this dream, they always wake up at different points during it. They wake up from what they assume at first is a nightmare. The Brotherhood of Sleep would understand that.
So people might not have made it to the end, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Brian took an Ambien and drank a lot of wine the night before.
Yeah, but you always the shadowy
figure. The YouTube ad kicks in and wakes him up.
The shadowy figure is always the same, though, if you think about it, because it has that image that there's wings.
It's flowing and robe-like until you see Catherine.
And Catherine's the only change in the figure.
Yeah. See, I don't, in my opinion, I don't think it's a stable time loop, and I don't think it was always Catherine. I think it raises the idea of how many times has this particular situation been stopped before, and how many different versions of that video have there been? Like, the Brotherhood of Sleep has existed and been getting this transmission for presumably a very long time.
I think it's stable in the sense of it could have been any one of those people in the building who ended up walking out.
I think the idea is, in my opinion, again, is that maybe Brian is what's supposed to be another new generation of the Brotherhood of Sleep, because now he has to prevent this video that he's seeing in his dreams. Mm-hmm. Maybe there have been other versions of this, so that they are changing the future every time they stop anti-God from coming, but now... I mean, but that also raises the question, it's always 1999.
Aren't you reading, at that point, though, you're starting to read way too much into a Carpenter film. You've already got a lot going on, and now we're going to just dwell on this thing with such little evidence and such little...
Well, he's the one who lobbed this grenade and ran away.
That's why we're talking about it.
Yeah, welcome to podcasting.
It's like we're fans, too, so we're going to turn it into fans.
Okay,
I'll admit to a mild interest.
But, okay... How far back? Who was the image? Do we have information of who the image was transmitted to? In other words, do they actually say it was only to people of this time, or it's been throughout the history of man that they've figured it out and transmitted to the multiple Earth locations throughout time, so that they always got it with the tachyon beam, or was it just a simple? Who all got this message?
Well, they say it's anybody within proximity to the green goo. So I think the idea is that they're just sending it back so that anybody who is there around it is getting that message, because that's why the priest lived there. The old priest who dies at the beginning, I think he lived in that church, and Father Loomis knows enough to explain to Barack what's happening, why they're having this dream,
and that we all have the same dream.
Yeah, they were all having the same vision dream.
I don't necessarily have an issue that this may have been the first or second group, but I think the first priest that died at the beginning, I think he may have been the first to, because they just started the technology that was able to receive the, because you have to be in the proximity, but you also have to. But the thing is, the Brother of Sleep never had that technology, so that technology doesn't enter until the scientists bring it in.
Well, the
So it's like-
technology that we're referring to is way in the future of a civilization
The far off
advanced.
year
Right.
of 1999.
Right.
Yeah,
And
we're
so-
we're still historically in '87. We're still in that literally anything could happen in the next.
But they had the computers and the radiology stuff and everything, and were able to measure seismic waves and everything. But the idea that the First Priest and Loomis didn't have that technology, and they still had the dream. So the fact that those tachyon energy beams, particles from the future, were hitting brain waves, that means I agree with Neville in the sense that this could have been over and over and over and over and over and over again until we finally get the group that has. But the groups before this would have only gotten, this is going to happen sometime.
Well, they're transmitting that message into people's consciences,
Right.
And into their dreams. So they
Right.
only receive it while they're sleeping. So I don't think it was necessarily a matter of technology. It's that trope of Neville. What year did Blade Runner come out?
83,
And what year is it set?
2019.
Yeah. So this year, I mean, back in the 80s, the idea of what the future would look like technology.
Where's my floating car?
Where's our floating cars? Where's our...
Why can't we have the cool dystopia?
Yeah, exactly. Where are
Where's
these
my
cities in the
replicant?
sky and, our massive space stations? I think the
And our
idea in
replicants.
87 was that, by 1999, we'll have the capability of sending a message back through time.
We'll send a fart joke
And-
to Charlemagne.
And then to go with the fact that we're talking about this from Carpenter and reading into it, it's like, again, I go back to Carpenter's posing the questions. It's our duty and our job as fans, as philosophers, as theoreticians, whatever, to explore and continue the questions, because obviously we have not dealt with them fully and completely yet. So yes, we're reading a lot into what Carpenter may have been presenting, but he had to have been knowledgeable enough and aware enough that I'm going to pose this question, people are going to talk about it. It wasn't like he was just throwing it out there because it's entertaining. I don't
Right,
think.
Damon Lindelof?
Like Damon Lindelof, who has gotten better if you watch Watchmen.
I don't.
Because second episode tonight, by the way, because his
They're
questions
not
are not.
sponsoring the show, They're not sponsoring
I know,
it. You don't have
but
to. Okay.
I-
you don't have
Senpai
to.
like-
has not
You don't
noticed
have to
you.
shill for Damon Lindelof.
I liked the pilot enough to say this is worth watching.
Well, it's occurring to me now at an hour and 17 minutes into the podcast that we started off this discussion by just jumping right the fuck into it. We didn't even give a description to the listeners of what we're talking about and what this movie's even about. And that I'm also realizing now that would be a very that could be an episode by itself, just trying to summarize this fucking
Yeah,
film.
that's
so
that's
what I'm saying is maybe you should have wikied it or watched it before you started listening to this.
And I think again, one of our jobs discussing this movie is that we don't necessarily have to give it a plot analysis and stuff. Is that yes, we may be giving Carpenter more intelligence points than he wanted, but the idea that hopefully we're creating enough interest in the movie to have people go and maybe wiki it or even just go
Now
watch
that we've
it.
spoiled the shit out of it, yeah.
And I don't think we have spoiled.
Spoilers
because-
don't do anything.
because like
to
I
this
said, I
movie.
thought I had seen it, and so it's like I'm watching. I'm like, I have not.
Well,
seen
maybe
this,
a
and this is
different-
super surprising.
Maybe a different version of the film was beamed into your dreams or through a tachyon transmission.
all the way from the
Maybe.
year 1999.
Wait a minute.
And maybe I am porn stash.
There's no doubt in my mind.
No, you apparently know how to trim your mustache evenly. The whole film. I don't know what happened on set. I don't know why no one. I didn't know. I looked it up. I tried to search. And has no one ever said anything about this before? No one. Why?
But it is distinctly a movie made in the 80s, set in the 80s, because they have costume designers on credited, and there's production designers credited and
Well, I
scene
don't think
designers.
anyone dressed
But-
themselves.
But the thing is, they could have dressed themselves, because it was literally clothes taken out of somebody's closet.
Well, I think that speaks to how well the costume design was done, because it doesn't immediately stand out to you like, wow, that's an insane costume for somebody. It just seemed natural.
Well, yeah. I mean,
I think if you'd been like, it would have spoken poorly of the costume designers if that's what we were talking about this whole time.
Yeah, but the idea that
I'm sorry, I zoned out for a second. What happened? Where are we in the conversation?
They just put jeans, the acid
Stan
wash
thinks
jeans
the costuming in the movie was too realistic, and that was jarring for him.
Okay, sorry. I literally, that wasn't a joke. I did zone out.
It's distinctly set in the period that it's set in.
Contemporary.
Because it's contemporary to its setting.
Did you just say it's set in the period that it's set in?
Yes, he did.
But what I'm saying is that...
do you know what you said?
I really don't think
You're arguing with yourself right now.
The hairstyles were correct.
All they had to do was have a hairstylist come in.
Because I had these hairstyles and I had these clothes. The cardigan sweaters wrapped around the neck and shoulders.
They literally
were
just
perfect.
walked off set and did whatever.
They didn't have to go too far from their own closets to clothe themselves, to costume themselves. So it's like, if you're watching it, what I'm saying is, if you go into this movie the first time now, don't let that be what turns you off, is because it's so dated in that sense.
I don't think I looked twice at what they were wearing.
No, and I think that's just because I was aware of when the movie came out and when it was set going into it.
I think being older, I didn't think twice about it because all the colors, the textures, people's styles, it was average for the time, so nothing jumped out as that.
Except for the one henchman looking guy, he was wearing a tropical Hawaiian shirt for some reason.
He was,
but still not
because he had to go Menace Magnum PI later that day.
But what I'm saying is that, having lived that, and it's like it's there, because there will be people going into if people do go into the movie for the first time, that's going to turn them off in a sense, because it's and they're not going to listen to ideas presented.
I think you have a very shallow idea of movie watching.
I think I know what Stan's getting at is that they're not going to see the characters as realistic, but more almost as caricatures,
exactly,
because they're going to think that their outfits are just over the top and weren't actually real clothes that people wore at the time.
I can see that. It can take people. The further you get away from certain movies, especially when they are contemporarily set, the first thing you're going to be like, wait, everyone dressed like that back then? You will think it, at least subconsciously.
Yeah, young viewers are going to be very upset when they get to watching movies from the 90s and realize how much flannel there was.
Oh, God.
Because it's not a design.
No,
the costume design is not a design. It's what they had in the closets and what they pulled out of the costume shop.
Although, depending on when you're watching, it could be retro at this point.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If you go in and not realizing the period that you're going to be.
What a weird divergence this discussion took.
But because we are asking people to go back and watch a movie that technologically is not contemporary, and that is.
How dare we?
That you're going to be offset. Because there's no cell phones, so it's like they actually had to go to a dial phone if they wanted to call out, and there's no phones in this church, so they couldn't call out, because you had brought up the idea earlier that we would be in our car calling in the data.
I'm sure there was a phone somewhere in that church.
It looked like a place that wouldn't. It looked like that with a recluse priest
they would have
lived
to go
there,
outside.
and
they would have like
isolated.
They would have to go outside and use a payphone.
The red phone that had a direct line to the Pope.
The
Pope phone.
The Pope phone. I could see a church like that in that time frame having like the one they needed to like for reception reasons to like make basic calls.
Exactly.
Order a pizza.
And it was obviously the intranet as opposed to the internet, because they couldn't really go out and explore.
That place had never seen a computer till they wheeled them in.
The thing is, all the computers were tied into each other, as opposed to mainframes on the outside of that church. So it's like there is a frame of context when you go into this movie that you were talking about the high concept, but the thing is if there is a high concept, it's because he had to traverse and go beyond what was available at the time. So it's like,
Right.
So the idea that a lot of extrapolation is done in this, okay, I got all this information. We have
Did
to
you
make
just say extrapolation?
I said extrapolation. I may have said it twice, but I said extrapolation. But there is leaps of faith in the idea of the technology at the time. So and they do it kind of seamlessly, in my opinion, from watching it the first time. Is that I wasn't trapped in the fact that they couldn't have done this at that period of time. So it's like the idea that the transmissions were coming
So,
tachyons.
if I'm understanding you correctly, it was a product of its time, but it was also simultaneously ahead of its time?
Exactly.
I do think you bring up a good point. Is as someone now watching, especially someone younger, not just the clothes, but also mentalities of things. How homeless people were looked at the time and thought of by the general society is different than it is now. And same thing with the references to the characters homosexual. That's
The phrase homosexual panic?
that just now that kind of slaps you in the face, but then it wouldn't have been taken the way it is now. And so I think those are things also beyond the styling and some of the other things you get. You have to take when a movie was made into consideration when you watch it, and not just outright dismiss it because of that. You have to understand at least when it was.
You're right, because he tosses out that line so casually, as in, everyone knows what that is.
It is progressive in the sense that they were strong women.
Yeah, but it's also very 80s, like Neville was saying, in Brian's casual misogyny in the beginning of the movie.
Sure.
We were watching it with Katie, and she was like, don't fucking go on a date with that guy after what he just said to you.
And then 2 short scenes later, they were in bed.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was saying that he stalked her,
Oh, yeah.
But the idea that...
You mean definitely not a cop?
But he was also presenting the fact that I can only be on the outside because I'm a nerdy scientist guy, so she's not going to be attracted. And he does present the worldview at the time that why is somebody that looks like you a scientist? And she's and the progressiveness of this film is that she questions that attitude, and that was really telling to me.
Thank you. I couldn't remember what horribly sexist thing it was that he said to her until you brought that out.
He said,
I just remembered he said something terribly sexist, and she took offense to it, understandably.
And he talked his way out of it. She didn't get up and leave. He actually got back off.
Backtracked.
Yeah.
And he presented it. He did present it as a joke.
Yeah.
Because
he presented it in that
because there's
I'm
nerds.
backtracking. No. Wait a minute. I was
I'm
just
joking
kidding.
if you're mad.
Yeah.
Yes. Because
I was being funny if you're not mad, but
because he didn't realize.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was completely serious. If you're not mad, but if you are mad, then I was just joking.
But the thing is, he was serious, but it was also a joke because he did present it. It's like there is a common thing. It's like there's none of us nerds, and it's like you're like one of 2 women in the whole department, and it's like, and you're pretty hot. It's like
good for you.
It's like, but the thing is that was not unusual
in '87.
In '87, and it's like, and he was presenting. He's doing the card trick. It's like, we can't believe that somebody that looks as good as you is hanging out with us nerds, and that's and he did present it as a general attitude. So and I think she reacted, and that was what was progressive. Really, just touching it makes.
You can't hear it very subtly.
The progressiveness is that she instantly took it and I think it's because of the work that she's done to get to her place.
Oh yeah.
And that he just threw away that work as a general statement
and focused on her appearance
appearance and then he's like, yes, I really only meant it as a joke. And it's like
he makes a lot of off-color jokes in the film because later there's a moment where Walter is complaining and he's like, oh man, I had a date this weekend. We were going to go to this fancy restaurant, blah, blah, blah. And without missing a beat, Brian goes, yeah, what was his name? Yeah. Just tying into...
I really think that, plus later when he is trapped by Kelly, by Kelly transforming and the other 2, he does randomly yell, I'm stuck in the closet.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the that John Carpenter's just like, he just had a running joke is like, he's clearly gay but doesn't know it.
Everyone around him does and is accepting of him for who he is, but it's the 80s, so we can't say that.
Yeah. And I don't want to say that you, as a watcher, you should just accept that like it's okay. I guess what I want to really convey is, at the time, it wasn't. People didn't recognize how harmful or sexist things really were.
Right.
We've come a long way from that, thankfully. But things like that tended to be not challenged, tended to be dismissed, wasn't seen as harmful to people as it really is. And so I think that's why you see it in films, but I think you have to realize that is it wasn't. It's kind of trying to, the film kind of presented the character similar to what a real person would be, with that level of insensitivity toward others.
And I think it's something that I mean, you should definitely be disappointed in, but not like get angry over, because it's like,
right.
There's only so much you can get angry about it.
And I think Carpenter does a good job in the film and all of this, because I mean, even in Halloween, he kind of turns all the sexism on its head. He creates. Isn't Laurie Strode the first?
I don't know if she's the first
acknowledged final girl.
I don't know if
but she's definitely one of the strongest.
Well, I guess you had
he definitely
Camille in I Spit on Your Grave and stuff.
Well, he definitely, I think, codified the promiscuous girls always get killed, like don't have sex in horror movies trope. Because of the three babysitters in that film, it's the two that are having sex that get killed, but it's the virginal Laurie that survives.
And then in this one,
I also think, did not get too far off track. That's also, I mean, it's also because sex itself is so intimate that you're letting your guard down completely. Mm-hmm. So you're leaving yourself open to a tragedy.
Yeah. And Catherine and
you got to keep those hands in check, bud.
And I'm not even talking with my hands today. Catherine and
okay.
You about chopped that desk in half.
This is again why we are eventually going to set up a camera and do video podcasts.
We've been milliseconds away from a karate demonstration.
But I get the karate
time.
chop making point though, because I find myself when I really get into a good point, by God, you got to throw that hand out there.
But you at least have the goddamn common courtesy to karate chop the air.
What was I saying?
I have no idea.
But Catherine and Pornstache have their sex before the and she dies. But the thing is,
and becomes an apostate of Satan.
She sacrifices herself. I think it was a different. I think this was a very pro woman. And all the women in it are strong. They may be possessed. They may get possessed, but
they're powered by Satan.
But that's part of a larger discussion, because in talking about a completely different director. But a while back, Katie and I were talking about Wes Craven and the progression of his female characters from like Last House on the Left, where they're entirely treated like victims and exploited, to 20 years later, Scream, where Sydney, Neve Campbell's character, does have sex and is not a virgin, but still ends up being the final girl. So I think it sort of speaks to the larger issue of the representation of female characters in horror over a 20, 30-year progression.
And I'm gonna give it up because I would say Sean S. Cunningham, but no, not even him as much. But John Carpenter and Wes Craven are the ones that are pro-woman.
Yeah, you go back as far as Alfred Hitchcock and Psycho and Marion Crane having an affair with a man out of wedlock and getting killed because of it. Well, not because of it, but she's so heavily viewed as a sex symbol that Norman Bates can't help himself but kill her. So
I think the Hays Code plays into that too.
What, that promiscuous women had to be.
There were the very moralistic guidelines set down on Hollywood.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really was surprised at how effective this movie was. Mm-hmm. In all its aspects, philosophically, I may have picked on its budget for special effects, but I think the effects for the most part, especially the cockroaches and eating of the body by the cockroaches, I thought, and the use of ants, the use of real
worms, the worms
going up the windows. Really super effective, and they keep coming back to it, and all the worms are doing is hanging on the window.
I like how people don't really react to that as much as you'd think. They look at the windows and they're like, huh.
Well, if presented with a swarm of ants or a swarm of bugs versus a swarm of homeless people who are killing anybody who tries to leave, I think I would be much more concerned with the homeless people.
The worms are smeared across the windows like jelly.
Yeah.
And moving.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
But just the level of effectiveness, and I was really touched by like Loomis's, Father Loomis's crisis of faith, and then
show us on the doll where it touched you.
and Barack's. I brought this up earlier. Their relationship for me was really super. And I don't know if they had a relationship in the past. I know he had to get a hold. He sent the nun to get Barack and so. But just the level of familiarity between them and
esteem and respect.
Esteem and respect.
Yeah, and it's such a nice subversion of the way that the whole man of science, man of faith aspect is typically played, where it's played as religion versus science and who's right. And here these two men have a lot of respect for each other.
Super collaborative.
Yeah.
Super collaborative.
Yeah, I think it's just a nice subversion of that trope. Chris Neville, do you have any final thoughts on Prince of Darkness?
Yeah, that's something we didn't touch on at all. I think it was fantastic cinematography. Mm-hmm. I think the music was well done. And I'll say with the cinematography, not just cinematography, but the way the first 10 minutes played out, you see just there's very little dialogue in the first bit. You just kind of know the situation with just a handful of words, and then the priest is going to talk to people. We see him talk, but we don't hear it because it doesn't matter. What matters is he's all of a sudden been set on fire, understands what's going on, and now he knows he's got to deal with it in a way.
Carrying that box.
Yeah, and exactly. And so we don't have to have a lot of explanation as an audience. The first 10 minutes of that film is visual for the most part, and it's very powerful the way things are framed, but also just the way we see people interact, with the priest interacting with others, because we don't have to hear the conversation, but we need to see them meet, and we get something from that.
The first appearance of the enthralled homeless folks.
Right, and it's all with just music.
Yeah.
And it really gave you a chance to get into the world without being overtaken with the story or the character, to get a feel, and then start feeling out this main character, the priest. Getting a feel for him once again without a ton of exposition or anything dumped on us. But also there were some very nice shots of low angles shooting up, because I think he used wide lenses, but he also shot it anamorphically. So we really had several scenes or several shots where things were very imposing.
I was about to say that typically was that shot's used for, to make it seem looming.
And there were some like that, but there were also places where we had symmetry with things were centered, but just the lighting was done well, and
it was really well lit.
Yeah, because you got the mood, you got depth, but it didn't overtake, and it didn't seem fake as well, except for those hundreds of candles the PAs had to light.
I was going to say, I want to know whose job it was in that church to keep those candles burning.
Yeah, I was immediately like, altar boys. You send altar boys to do that.
The way they made the church look bigger on the inside than the outside.
Yeah, you did.
And also, Chris, this was supposed to be a Catholic church. Those altar boys were probably busy.
You hush.
But the music was good too. It was the Carpenter style of bass line. So it's essentially bass chords that held on took the place of what you would normally have as strings in a typical soundtrack. And also the depth of that bass also resonated as a seriousness and almost as a level of kind of a malevolence. So I really enjoyed we see that in some of his soundtracks. You see it with
It's a good
you
level-
hear it with
It's a good level of subtlety because when it hangs on a little too long, because your brain picks up on that, even if not
Yeah.
consciously. It's like something seems off about the music. I think sometimes, a lot of times,
yeah.
you can. Sorry, you okay, Stan?
Setting my hands now.
I think a lot of times more modern people trying to compose like horror stuff, they try to hit it too hard on the head.
There was a lot of things in the sound design where it literally asks you to listen, especially the messages from the future. You had to like stop and focus your ears to hear, because they had so much noise in the deliverance of the white noise, and it's like.
Yeah, you wanted to strain to hear it because
Exactly.
it's like you knew this is important and things are getting in your way, and it made you. It turned up the dial on the importance of what was being said.
And like you were talking, Neville, you were talking about the first 10 minutes and him going around to the archdiocese and everything to get permission to use the key to open the door and everything to the Brotherhood of Sleep's keep. But all of that being, you still were listening. I found myself saying, okay, I know there's no dialogue in here. There's nothing I need.
You're trying to read lips at this point?
But you're still listening to what's going on. And then when we get, and there was so much, the actors weren't yelling, or he was using the, he turned on the mics for the camera, but he used the ambient sound of the classrooms when Barack was first speaking and delivering his lecture. It was the sound of the lecture room that you heard, the echo of, so it asked you to listen to this movie, and I thought that was really, really great.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was trying to find, I read where somebody had transcribed the entire message, and now I can't remember where it was that I saw it. Anybody else have any thoughts while I try to look this up so I can read it out loud and read the entirety of it?
One, I feel like if anyone else finds himself in this particular situation, if you go into a Catholic church and you find one room in there that is plastered with crucifixes, leave.
That's exactly what I thought.
If they felt the need to put that many in one room, you got a problem.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. So the much talked about tachyon broadcast from the future, the full text of it goes, "This is not a dream, not a dream. We are using your brain's electrical system as a receiver. We are unable to transmit through conscious neural interference. You are receiving this broadcast as a dream. We are transmitting from the year 1999. You are receiving this broadcast in order to alter the events you are seeing. Our technology has not developed a transmitter strong enough to reach your conscious state of awareness, but this is not a dream. You are seeing what is actually occurring for the purpose of causality violation." So there you go. It doesn't get any more terrifying than that.
And for anyone who's made it all the way to the end, here is the summary in case you haven't watched it yet. Science and religion team up to fight Satan's gooey center. Good night.
There we go. All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us for this episode.
Oh, yeah.
I hope you enjoyed the film and being part of this insanity that we call Long Walk Talks.
Yeah, I did.
So thank you.
Yeah.
You're the first.
Thank you, Chris Barnes and Stan Wilson Barnes, for being a part of this. As
Wait a
always,
minute.
our next episode, we are going to continue the new Roaring 20s discussion with the best films of, somebody help me out again, 2010 through 14?
Yes.
That's right, yeah. So if you enjoyed this show, please make sure to check out our sister show, This Is a Work, a wrestling podcast hosted by David Two Dogs Hayes and our very own Chris Barnes. And if you enjoy the show, please also make sure to leave us a rating and a review. Have a good time and a spooky, extra happy Halloween.
Peace out.
All right.